All in Sports Network. We love sports.
How's it going, everyone? So happy to be back here on All in Aggies. Ben Peck with you. We're going to take a look at so many things that we need to get caught up over the past week. We're going to start with the transfer portal and where Texas A&M needs to be looking as they've solidified their recruiting class, and now phase 2 of the recruiting cycle, if you will, picks up. Just want to address, I know I've been gone here for about a week. Just real quick, wanted to let you guys know, basically, I had sort of two sort of emergencies. A personal emergency come up in the middle of the week last week, had to get some stuff figured out. And then health-wise, I actually had a scare a couple times earlier this year where I went to the hospital for a brief period of time with some digestive issues. Didn't have that happen to, I wasn't hospitalized, but I did have to get some stuff checked out, which was keeping me on the bench sideline. So apologies for the absence, but we're going to pick up right where we left off and kind of go from here. Last we talked, it was Texas A&M losing to Texas. Since then, a lot has happened. First off, this recruiting class, number 8 in the country, Jerome Miles, I think, was a late addition along with Lamont Rogers. It's crazy. They're number 8 in the country, but I think that's something like 6th in the SEC. Welcome to this new super powerful SEC. A lot of talented depth in there. Lamont Rogers and Jerome Miles, as we mentioned, offensive lineman Lamont Rogers kind of headlining that group along with Jerome Miles. Jerome Miles was literally the day of decision for them. And then they just got a lot of good quality depth up and down the roster when you look at different positional groups. I think Mike Elko said something along the lines of, we wanted to build a football team with this class, starting 22 almost, if you will. And they certainly did that. So I think a lot to work on, and, 20 blue chip players, if you look at it, according to 24/7 Sports. So I think a lot to build on. And again, it's going to be about the evaluation of these guys rather than just chasing stars, as we've seen in the past from previous coaching staffs. That I think is where you put your trust in Mike Elko, Colin Klein, Jay Bateman. We'll see what coaching adjustments get made personnel-wise on that end as the offseason unfolds, but just wanted to address that real quick. Now going to the portal. Listen, no secret, if we took a look at the big priorities for me, it has to be wide receivers. Guys, Texas A&M has nobody coming back in terms of solid production outside of really Noah Thomas and Terry Bussey. Terry Bussey obviously kind of figuring out where you wanted to play him on the field. Got it going a little bit later on in the year. You've got some young depth in there as well. Guys like Ashton Bethel-Roman, other guys like Isaiah Williams, like Jonathan Bossert. You've got some players there, but in terms of proven production at the top, really what kills you is losing. You knew you were going to lose Moose Muhammad and Ja'Day Walker, and this was already a somewhat thin group in terms of the top contributors. Now you lose Cyrus Allen as well. So this becomes, in my mind, a huge area of need. But lucky for Texas A&M, it appears that help could be on the way very soon. First target that I think has to be a priority, Micah Hudson, the kid from Lake Belton, Temple, who was a 5-star, went to Texas Tech, of course. Didn't see much playing time down the stretch, but did flash his potential at times. And he's a guy that Texas A&M was sort of the last, my understanding, Texas A&M was sort of the last team that really had a real chance at the end to sway him away from Texas Tech. Now, he's stuck with the Red Raiders, and reports coming out he's going to be on an official visit for Texas A&M. That's going to be huge. Another guy where reports coming out that he's going to be visiting Texas A&M, Kevin Concepcion from NC State. A guy who I'm not sure All-American honors, if those have come out yet this year and which publications you go by, but certainly, of that caliber wide receiver and a proven instant contributor. Really we haven't seen in the transfer portal era Texas A&M be able to bring in guys who were like proven known commodities right off the bat that you knew, with the exception, I would say, of Nick Scorton. I'm not saying you haven't brought in guys from transfer portals who haven't been instant contributors, but there's that tier of guys who you say, okay, this guy's going to be able to come in and he's already a proven product at a high level. We can just slide him in, almost like what we see with baseball, honestly, to be honest. Like you look at some of the guys they bring in and you say, okay, this guy is maybe don't know how it's going to translate to the SEC. Same would be true in these cases, but this guy is a proven commodity in some sense. And we know you can at least count on maybe these skill attributes to translate. And I think that's what some of these guys bring. Again, I know Micah Hudson, the production wasn't necessarily off the charts, but the talent, undeniable. Kevin Concepcion, the talent and production backed up. Another guy entering the portal. I want to double check to make sure this was not, I think this was real. Cam Coleman going in the portal from Auburn. He's a guy, obviously, we saw up close and personal, unfortunately, for Texas A&M, how impactful he was. Almost 600 yards, 8 touchdowns as a true freshman for the Tigers. Long time Texas A&M commit. I would hope Texas A&M would be in the mix for that. So looking at that wide receiver position again going into next year, you've got Terry Bussey, assuming he stays back there, Noah Thomas, and they have some recruits in that signing class as well who I think will get a chance to show what they can do, and the guys who have been on the roster. But if you do some combination of those 3 guys and Noah Thomas and Terry Bussey and the depth stepping up and the freshmen, then I feel a lot better. But right now, that needs to be an area of utmost importance for Texas A&M. Just want to go down the list a little bit. Quarterback, obviously, Connor Wigman leaving. Understandable. Kind of saw it coming, but it was, that video circulating after the game where he was kind of soaking it all in, I think, is what he said. Really feel bad just the way the whole situation played out. I still think there's a world where Connor Wigman, I would not be shocked if he goes somewhere and tears it up, a la Haynes King, or even better than that. So we'll see where he goes, but that does create some depth concerns at that position. Jalen Henderson also on the way out. So I know Jacob Zeno has been sort of a guy. I think people are reporting he's going to be in for a visit. By the way, I don't want to name drop exactly some of these things because I know multiple people are reporting the same people visitors. I don't want to, attribute it to somebody when 3 other people have it and feel like I'm calling them out and giving them all the credit. But I just have a list of notes of guys that I've seen confirmed reports that they're going to be on a visit. Jacob Zeno, really talented with Baylor, UAB this past season. I think he'd be ideal in terms of what you need from that. You just need like a backup plan and insurance policy for Marcel Reed. Offensive line, I think is a concern. The depth on the offensive line. I think you're seeing a lot of guys transfer out. I've got the list here. Aki Ogunbi, Cam Dewberry, Hunter Erb, TJ Shanahan at the time that I'm taping this. All those guys on the way out. And so I think your starting 5 you feel okay enough about, but it's the depth around it where you really could use some help. But also, if you could get an instant, plug-in starter or 2, that'd be great. I mean, we saw that with Armaj Reed-Adams, Coley, I can't ever say his name. The center from Utah came in. We saw a few of those guys be able to do that. So, if we can see that again, just keep raising the bar with that O-line. That's going to be huge. Defensive line is, I think, an area of intrigue for me. I mean, Shamar Stewart going to the draft along with Nick Scorton. That was announced today. Shamar Turner already ran out of time just in terms of, used up his eligibility along with, I think, Rodis Johnson, Albert Regis. So you lose some guys there. You lose Samu Taumano Pepe and Gabriel Brownlow-Denny to the portal. So now all of a sudden that D-line, which has been such an area of strength and depth for Texas A&M, is starting to it's going to have a lot of new faces. I mean, you're probably going to see in terms of the starting lineup across the board, 4 new faces if you consider, Shamar Stewart, Scorton, and then Shamar Turner and Albert Regis as sort of your 4 starters, you're going to have a whole new starting lineup there. You do have DJ Hicks. I think you got to lean on him. You need a big year from him, but I think that's another area where I could see the Aggies going after some guys. Also, some other guys from that kind of edge unit, Malik Silla, Eni White, those sort of prototype edge rushers who could drop back to play linebacker. They've hit the portal as well. Linebacker, I think, Scooby and Torian are back. I feel pretty good about those two, but depth never hurts. And then defensive back, I think, I haven't seen any attrition to this point, but needs to improve, certainly in terms of perimeter tackling along those lines. Also, just wanted to touch on this. I was going to touch on this if I wasn't sick on that Sunday. My sort of post reaction from Texas. I think that game stood out to me that Texas A&M is probably a lot further behind in the trenches than we would maybe like to think, and that it maybe appeared at some point earlier in the season. When you looked at the way Texas was able to control the line of scrimmage, that's the type of team that I think defensively you were counting on for Texas A&M, which, to be honest, showed up at times. At times it did not. And it like the Texas game, prime example, you get run on for 240 yards or whatever it was. And then, so defensively it was a little in and out, but offensively, there was that stretch of games where A&M was controlling everything with their line of scrimmage, and they were pushing guys around, moving guys. And then that kind of went away in some games when they started having that struggle. It was not as easy to run the ball. Now, listen, Le'Veon Moss was a huge part of that. So that goes without being said. Losing him was a huge injury. And if you would have had a healthy Reuben Owens from the beginning along with him, that's a whole different dynamic. But just in terms of that offensive line, I think you'd like to see a little more consistency there. And I think that'll just take time. I think it'll get there, but I think it's going to take some time to get together. And just lastly, wanted to say on the course of the season. So we have that kind of wraps up our transfer portal discussion, by the way, for the moment. A lot of moving parts. We'll keep an eye on it. But if you haven't already, please subscribe, help us out, and like the video if you enjoy any and all Texas A&M content we bring you. We try to talk about every sport on campus as much as we can, give you a well-rounded look at all programs on the campus of Texas A&M. Bowl game coming up, Las Vegas Bowl against USC. That'll be an interesting game. I think it'll be fun to see some of those receivers step up. We'll probably see Ja'Day Walker, I would imagine. I don't know that we'll see a lot of guys sitting out the bowl game that aren't in the portal, but I would like to see a couple things in that bowl game. Number one, that defensive line youth stepping up. If we see an opt-out from all those guys going to the draft and obviously in the portal, then you're going to kind of get a preview of what they have to offer. Obviously, any progression with Marcel Reed, the offensive line, the guys that you're going to have coming back there, see what they can do if they've been able to make some strides. The depth beyond the depth that you lost in the portal, if it comes into play. The secondary linebackers, again, I think there's probably not going to be as much turnover with those units, but just continue to improve play. And then, obviously USC's in a weird spot because Miller Moss at the portal. I'm not sure who they're going to have available. I would feel relatively comfortable about the Aggies' chances in that game because I just don't know. I know A&M is going to lose a lot in the defensive line in terms of opt-outs and whatnot. But beyond that, I think they'll be fine in terms of most of their parts defensively beyond the D-line. And then, if some of those seniors receivers, like if Ja'Day Walker and Moose Muhammad play, I think you'll be okay for that game to get by, or at least where you were during most of the regular season. So USC is obviously going through kind of a weird time. They had a weird year where they didn't, I know everyone likes to dunk on Lincoln Riley, and listen, I'm here for it, but they did have a weird year where they really struggled closing out one-score games. So does that go to maybe should they have been a little bit better than they are? I think maybe. Now, is it a coincidence? It's almost like the Jimbo thing, right? Like you're in all these close games and you can't close a lot of them out. If you start to notice a trend, is that like just bad luck, or is something maybe not clicking right that's leading to all that? So I do think that's probably a contributing factor. In other words, I think that they created some of their own bad luck and misfortune with how they performed in these close games and one-score games. But it must be said, they did kind of keep things close a little bit for a lot of them. So I don't know. Obviously, these bowl games, after you get through the playoff or once you get past the playoff games, are kind of a crapshoot these days. We'll see. We'll see what it looks like. Really want to see Marcel Reed step up. If we can maybe see some of those receivers, that youth and the depth, make some plays and kind of get a preview into next year in the D line. That's what I'm going to be looking at. Want to also just briefly, because I wanted to talk about this last week, just 30,000 feet above the evaluation of the season for Texas A&M. I think I'll put it this way. If you would ask a lot of Aggies, hey, Mike Elko, first year, 8-4, and you're in it until the very end, would you take it? I think most people would. I don't even know most people. I think a lot of people would say, sure, that's a fine, good year, and that's plenty good enough to build on when you look at especially the rest of the SEC and the way things played out. Now, if you said you're 8-4, but you struggled the way you finished, and maybe even leave that part out. But if you say, okay, now you're 8-4, but Texas happens to go 11-1, beat you on the way to the SEC championship game, would you take that, or would you roll the dice? I think maybe the combination of those two makes it hurt a little more. I think if Texas was like 9-3 or even 10-2, but they had beaten you and you're 8-4 and they didn't make it to Atlanta, then I think you feel okay. But I think the way that goes, that was the one team that had an opportunity to sort of say, hey, we're the only ones in this conference who took care of our business. The rich get richer. You know, they got the number one recruiting class in the country. They're going to go crazy in the portal once again, you'd imagine. So that maybe that combination was a little leery. But I would say in terms of, was this a successful year for A&M? I think that's a little more, up for interpretation. I would put it this way. I think it was a productive year for Texas A&M. You accomplished a lot of key objectives you needed to. You came up short in some areas, but at least you know where those areas are. If Connor Wigman, for example, was not going to really be able to hit his stride in this Colin Klein offense, you were able to make the change to Marcel Reed quick rather than go into 2025 in sort of this limbo of like, okay, what are we doing? How's it going to play out? Connor's got another, I think, 2 years if he wants them. Are you kind of stuck in this in-between deal for a while? You figured that out. Even the stuff that didn't hit on all cylinders, you were at least able to get some answers on. I think you saw a lot of progression and improvement from, some areas across the board. I think the offensive line, we forget how much the offensive line struggled. I know I just said they need to get better for A&M to be kind of at that SEC championship caliber level, but I think we forget how dire some of the straits were for Texas A&M with that offensive line under the later years of Jimbo Fisher and Steve Addazio. So I think that was a huge stride, and then you supplement it with guys like Lamont Rogers coming in on that offensive line. Some other guys as well, by the way. There was another guy, Nelson McGuire, I like what I see with him. He's a 4-star interior offensive lineman from Midlothian. So that's just one guy that I happened to look at his stuff and was pretty excited by. So, you've got some answers that you're searching for, some things that you figured out. I think this was a successful season for Mike Elko? I think it's hard to say that knowing the way it ended, but it was a productive season, in my opinion, for Mike Elko and the Aggies. All right. I think that is going to wrap up the football talk for this portion of the show. I want to touch on a few other things. before we wrap it up here. But again, if you haven't already, subscribe, help us out. I've got a lot more that now that I'm back into the flow of things, a lot more I'm wanting to do with this channel. I'm going to be looking for new social media accounts coming up. So be sure to keep an eye on that if you would. And just, we're going to keep you plugged in through portal season and everything else. Let's talk a little bit about Texas A&M basketball. Again, have not talked about them to the degree we need to, but the Aggies 8-2 after a 72-67 win over Texas Tech. That game back and forth for a little while. We saw it run early, and then Tech, closed the gap. A&M able to close out late, which I think was very encouraging to see. And, you look at some of the numbers, I think this is going to be the permanent X factor for Texas Tech teams with Buzz Williams. 37.5% shooting from three. That's good for can't do math. 3 out of 8. 3 for 8. That's a 3 for 8 clip. 9 for 24. So I think that'll always get the job done. Texas Tech shot similar, but also what we saw was the return of the offensive rebounds, and that advantage coming back for Texas A&M. Saw in Washington 6 offensive rebounds. By the way, that was only with 1 for Anderson Garcia, who obviously limited playing time with the fouls. But if you can out offensive rebound your opponent 2-1 with Texas A&M the way they like to play, that's going to pay a lot of dividends moving forward. Inefficient from the floor, some of the guys, Zurich Phelps, Wade Taylor, but they come up clutch when you need them. Clutch free throw shooting down the stretch, and a nice productive win, 72-67 over Texas Tech. I like the depth and the variety that you can see with this team as well. We talked about Wade Taylor. He's probably going to get some stuff. I think it's probably safe to say Zurich Phelps has inserted himself as a guy that you can count on sort of, a double-digit-ish effort from on any given night. But who else is going to step up? Can they and will they have enough consistent production, not from one player in particular, but from that supporting cast on a nightly basis in order to do what you need to do? And, a guy that we've put into that boat for a while, I have, going back to last season, Jason Carter. Jason Carter, when you look at what he did, I want to see if I can find his stats from his year at Illinois Chicago. He was their leading guy, 16.6 points per game. Now on 30%, on 45% from the field, 30% three-point shooting. Three-point shooting has not improved to this point, but he has been that guy. He's been the guy for his team. So can you count on him every now and then to go for double digits or do something along those lines? I say yes. By the way, A&M has another thing I'm really encouraged by. They have just gone relative to non-conference schedules. They have played a gauntlet to start the year in terms of UCF on the road, shorthanded, a close loss. And then after a couple cupcakes, you had Ohio State and Southern, then lose to Oregon, but you go Creighton, Rutgers. Creighton, by the way, who just beat Kansas the other day, number 1 Kansas. Rutgers has a lot of exciting guys on that team. Wake Forest, Texas Tech. They've won some high-scoring games, higher-scoring games. They've won some slugfests like Wake Forest. Now they've got Purdue coming up later on this weekend. So they've got stuff going on all over the place. And when you look at it, I just think Texas A&M is in a real good position heading into the last few non-conference games before SEC play. By the way, what a way to start off SEC play at home against Texas on January 4th. So a little hat tip to the schedule makers there. Kind of wish it was during a little disappointed that it's not during school. It'll be during the winter break, but still, I think that place will be packed. Come to College Station for a nice little afternoon or evening matchup, I should say, 7 p.m. But A&M heading in the right direction. 8-2, shouts to them, and really excited to see what they can do moving forward. I said this going back to last year, I thought they were going to be a Sweet 16 caliber team, which if you look at the ranking coming into the year, did make sense. They stumble, they get hot at the right time, they They play really well in the tournament, almost beat Houston. And now I think you're starting to see, with this group of players. I think we played it early on this year, that core of Nanny Obaseki, Henry Coleman, Wade Taylor, Anderson Garcia, Solomon Washington, all these guys who have played with this team for at least 3 seasons or more. Hayden Hefner. This is their last ride together as a group. Solomon Washington will be back. But I don't know. It just feels like a really special time for them. Happy for them. Happy to see the success they're having. Just a few other notes before we go. The ladies, listen, I said it earlier after the loss to A&M Corpus Christi. Now, that obviously was not a hot take necessarily at the time, but really concerned about the way things are going for this team. Close win over UTSA as well. And then I just don't know. I mean, they did beat my Syracuse Orange, so I'll give them that. But, lost to Ball State in the tournament. Ball State, I think, is a little bit better than most MAC teams, to be fair. But, come on. We're still talking about the MAC at the end of the day and SEC women's basketball. I think the struggle for me is always just this team is going to have to grind out games. And I don't know where the scoring is going to come from on a consistent enough basis. And then you look at the defensive efforts when they go up against a certain threshold of teams, they're just not able to slow them down enough at this point. And that concerns me moving forward. Joni Taylor, year 3, She lost a lot in the portal and was not able to replenish a lot of it with comparable talent. I think we'll see how this year plays out. I don't like to get into overly speculating on long-term trajectory of things until after the season plays out. But I do think, or unless a move is actually made, but it'll be year 4 next year. I don't know what they're going to be able to do this season, but year 4 coming up next year, I think you need to start to see some answers. Now, the encouraging thing, I will say this. The encouraging thing is I still think this team is better than the team she had year 1. And if you look at the turnaround she had from year 1 to year 2, who's to say she couldn't do similar things from year 3 to year 4, maybe even better, having shown, hey, you don't have to imagine it. I can have a kind of a tough year, tough go of it, but a productive year, like we talked about with football, to set us up for a good next year and be able to sell that to people like Aisha Coulibaly, to India Rogers, to Lauren Ware, players like that who came in and make immediate contributions. So maybe that's something you can hang your hat on. But 89-50 on Sunday to Kansas State. Certainly, now Kansas State's a good team, but just something to monitor moving forward there. And then lastly, 2 last things. Shouts to Texas A&M volleyball back in the Sweet 16 for the first time in a long time. I think it's 2019, I want to say. Going to Lincoln to play Wisconsin and maybe Nebraska eventually. 3-1 wins over Arizona State, Colorado State. Shouts to my girl Sydney and Rachel if you're listening. Colorado State Rammies, but they come up short. And then a nice win on the road, by the way, at Arizona State. And the third set really took control. The final, 25-15. I was able to catch a little bit of this live. I kind of tried to go back and watch some more of it. But really, I mean, it must be said, first of all, hitting 303 as a team is really impressive. I was told someone, imagine hitting percentage like you would batting average back in like the 90s as like your benchmark. So if you're hitting 300, you're doing something. Logan Lednicki hitting 527 kills on another level in that game. A&M having some blocks as well. But anyway, listen, I just want to give them a shout. They're doing well. And we said after that Texas match, when they beat Texas on the road, and they kind of quietly got hot toward the end of the year as well. They got swept 2 matches in a row, Mississippi State and Kentucky. Kentucky's a team that has had a pretty good pedigree. You lose on the road at Tennessee. You're on this 3-game losing skid, but then you finish out the season, 4-game win streak, and then you carry it into the tournament with a couple wins. I think this team is capable of beating anybody on any given night. They're also capable of losing to far too many people on any given night. Like, that's the long-term arc of this team, I think, is to tie that part up. But really encouraged and happy with what we're seeing from those ladies, and congratulations to them going on to the Sweet 16. And finally, women's golf update. As we've been coming to know here, listen, as we told you, we do everything on this show, all the scores, all the teams. The update for this is in regards to the LPGA Tour. You had 4 Aggies in the mix, including Adela Cernusic, who was the individual national champion from last year, who decided to leave Texas A&M, forgo her senior season not that long ago, about a couple weeks ago, to pursue this opportunity. You have to declare pro to basically do this final qualifying stage to make it onto the LPGA Tour starting in the spring. You can't try out, get cut, or not make it, and then come back. You have to declare yourself a professional. So she had a decision to make after not only advancing past that Q school stage earlier, but winning that tournament, or that event, if you will. She needs to finish in the top 25, including ties, to make it to the LPGA. Right now, she is 2 shots above the cut line with about 14 holes to go. They had this final round rained out today, play suspended. So, but she started off really poor, 75 in round 1, and then she followed it up 75, 71, 65, 66. And she was 1 over through 4 holes on Monday today. But, I think early enough in the round for everybody that hard to gauge, whether that was a good score or not. Also, shout out to 3 other Aggies in that tournament: Maddie Zurich, Haley Cooper, and Blanca Fernandez Garcia Poggio. Blanca, by the way, probably has the best outside shot of all those ladies to make it through. She is at 1 under through 8 holes. That's going to be tough. I thought she had more holes to go, but she's 5 shots back of the cut line. So if she comes out and plays with her hair on fire, maybe. And if some of the other people above her kind of waver a little bit, but she needs to make up 5 shots there, she could maybe have a chance. Doesn't look like Maddie Zurich or Haley Cooper are going to be able to make that cut, but they did make the top 65 cut, or top 66. I think it was top 60 with ties. So they did make that cut into the final round, the 5th round of this 5-round qualifying tournament. So look, 4 Aggies in the top 60 for the final stage to make it to the LPGA Tour. And one of them, Adela, by the way, tied for 12th right now, if you're curious. And then tied for 21st is 6 under, and 5 under is tied for 26. So tied for 28th. So it looks like Adela in position to potentially make the LPGA Tour. That's amazing. That's really the headline for that one that I wanted to give a shout out to. All right. Thank you guys so much. And again, apologies for being gone so long. Just had a lot of stuff going on. But we'll be back here. Going to keep an eye out for some new social accounts going out there as well. And let us know your thoughts on today's show. Like the video if you liked it, and comment. Let us know your thoughts on who you'd like to see A&M go after in the portal, what you made of the season, what you made of the signing class, what you made of, what you make of basketball, men or women. How do you think things are trending? What excites you about those teams? Let us know, and be sure to share this video as well if you enjoy it. Help us grow the show, make it the best we can possible. Thank you so much. Hope you all have a great rest of your week.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.